Hi everybody, we are going to do problem 18.7b together in lieu of lecture. So let's get started. So I've gotten a little bit done here, so let's go through it. So we have two departments, so again this is problem 18.7b and it is on page 837 of your textbook. So we have the molding and finishing departments. We are going to add direct materials and conversion throughout the month at different rates. And then we have the information for each department below. So we need to complete the following requirements for the molding department. We're going to prepare a schedule showing units started and completed first. So let's work on that first. So I've gotten a little bit done here. So our units in beginning work in process, if we go look at the fact pattern, we look at the table and see that we have beginning inventories on June 1st. And so then we see physical units in production carried forward from May 31st. That has to be our units in beginning work in process, that 3,000, because that would have been, if they were carried forward from May 31st, they were still being worked on. So they are sitting there in beginning inventory waiting to be completed during June from May 31st. So that's our beginning work in process. So then we know, if we go down to current production, that units started during June, because remember we're looking for units started and completed. So we know that units started during June were 50,000. So now we know how many units if we're in our beginning inventory, how many we started. So those two together had to be how many units we had in process for the entire month. Okay. But there's one more piece to the puzzle. Whatever was left over in our ending inventory in work in process, which if we go look, units and ending inventories as of June 30th, right under our units started during June. We had 1,000 that were in ending inventory. So that has to be the difference. If we take, let's make this all pretty here, underline it. If we subtract, let's go ahead and put parentheses around this so we know we're subtracting. If we subtract 1,000 units, that's left over in our ending inventory, that has to be what we transferred out. Pretty up my spreadsheet here. Alright, so units transferred to finishing has to be 52,000. Now, remember, we've kind of gone through a problem like this before. We know how many were transferred to finishing, but that's not units started and completed, because remember, keywords, started and completed. What would not have been started? Those units in our beginning work in process. So we need to take those out. Again, we're accountants, we like underlines, so we'll do that. So that means units started and completed in June and make this all pretty, line it up, 49,000. We like that number because when we're calculating equivalent units, we're going to count every single one of those puppies. So all 49,000. Okay, so now we can start working on our equivalent units. So remember, direct materials and conversion are added throughout the process at different rates. Okay. So we need to finish our work in process. Let's make that beginning work in process. Okay. So with respect to direct materials, we had 3,000, remember, units in our beginning work in process. And we know we're going to multiply times whatever our completion is. So we go back and look at our fact pattern. So, percentage of completion down at the bottom of the table. Inventories with respect to direct materials on June 1st in the molding department were 70% complete with respect to direct materials. So what we have to do is finish our beginning work in process. If those were 70% complete, they are going to require 30% to finish them. So those 3,000 units become 900. Now, how complete were they with respect to conversion? So again, 3,000 units. We know that. Go look with respect to conversion on June 1st. They were 40% complete. So remember, we're finishing our beginning work in process. If they were 40% complete, they need 60% to get them finished up. First step's done. So let's start and complete. Let's call it started and completed. With respect to direct materials, we've already calculated that number, 49,000 for both. Now we need to start our units in process for June. So if we go look, our units in process were 1,000 units. Where did we get 1,000? We need to go look at what our ending inventory was. Because remember, our costs are going to be incurred as we produce things. Our ending inventory has been started, so we need to know what went into starting that ending work in process. Okay. So we know we have 1,000 units. We go look at our fact pattern. Inventories with respect to direct materials on June 30th are 80% complete in the molding department. Those costs have already been put in there. So we count 80%. With respect to conversion, they are 20% complete. So those 1,000 units times 20% of the costs have been incurred already. The remainder will be our beginning work in process the next period. So let's pretty this up with an underline. Now, sum everything up. These are our equivalent units. For June. Okay? We're 3/4 of the, no, not quite 3/4, halfway there. So we know if we go back to what we need to do in the instructions, part 1, we have the units started and completed. We've computed the equivalent units of direct materials and conversion for the molding department. So now we need the cost per equivalent unit of input resources for the molding department for June. So go back and look at our fact pattern. Our molding costs transferred to finishing during June are 0 and unknown, so we need to figure that out. Direct materials costs incurred in June, 912,600 and 612,000. So what would our costs incurred by the molding department in June entail? So if we look, direct materials costs are 912,600. 912,600. And we have, that is actually going to be our cost because we didn't have any transfer costs, and our conversion costs incurred in June were all incurred in June. So should have 912. Yeah, so direct materials, we're going to split those up. So let's do it separately. So our direct materials costs in June were 912,600. With respect to direct materials, we had that number above, number of equivalent units, 50,700. So our cost per equivalent unit is going to be our total costs divided by our total equivalent units, so 18 bucks. So let's do the same for conversion costs. Oops. So our conversion costs in June were 612,000. We know how many equivalent units we had. So we figured it out above. So we had 51,000. So our cost per equivalent unit, I'm going to divide those out. 12 bucks. Okay. So now we know our cost per equivalent unit with respect to both direct materials and conversion in the molding department. So we have pretty much going to follow. Oh, actually, we need to do one more piece here. We need to prepare the summary journal entry required to transfer units from molding to the finishing department. So we did a similar thing in class, so we need to know what our costs were. This is the whole need for doing this whole exercise. So we're going to transfer how many units? If we go back in our fact pattern, we know that we transferred 52,000 units to finishing. So we're going to have a journal entry to reflect that. So how much is it going to be in our journal entry? So we know the cost of our beginning inventory so we had $37,800 transferred over and 14,400. So with respect to direct materials, I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to get you guys to calculate this so it's not confusing. Hold on just a second. Okay, so let's actually just do it. I think I'm going to explain this in a much simpler way. Transfer 52,000 units to the finishing department. So we know 52,000 units. You do this with a formula. Were transferred. We know what our costs were. Cost per equivalent unit of direct materials was $18. So you can do this in 2 steps or you can do it in 1, however you want to. We'll do it in 2 steps. We know that those had conversion costs, $12 worth. So those two together are total. So we'd have $30 in costs times 52,000 units. Oops, there's a typo in my formula. It happens. So $156,000, or $156,000, $1,560,000. So let's do that. And move that. Oops. Sorry, I haven't sat down to Excel in a while. Here we go. So $1,560,000. So we know our journal entry is going to have that much in it. Okay. So then what does our journal entry look like? Well, we know we're working in our work in process inventories. So if it's being transferred out, guess who's getting it? Finishing department. So that $1,560,000 goes to them. We're done with it in this department. It's a lot of indent, but you get the point. So that has to be coming from work in process from the molding department. Those costs are being transferred out. Okay, so that's all we have to do for our journal entry. So now we need to do the same thing for our finishing department. Oh, we actually, one more piece. We need to compute the cost assigned to ending inventory in the molding department. In June. So as of June 30th. Alright, so what do we do with that? So we know we had 800 equivalent units with respect to direct materials that we started. So remember, we start the units in process, that becomes our ending inventory. So 800 units times $18 a unit. That was our equivalent unit cost with respect to direct materials. So $14,400. Okay. So this was direct materials. Now let's do the same thing for conversion. So we had 200 equivalent units there. That's where we calculated this. So that's our ending work in process. And conversion costs are $12. So between the two, make this all pretty again. We have $16,800 in costs. Assigned to our ending inventory in process as of June 30th. Okay. All right, that's it for molding. So now we need to do the finishing department. So we're going to go through the same process. So we need to find the flow of physical units first. Okay. So started and completed is what we're looking for. So let's actually just use the same headings. Units in beginning work in process. For the finishing department, we go look at our fact pattern. Oops, not 50,000, there were 5,000 in there. So units started in June. What would that have been? That can be a little bit of a puzzle here. how many units would we have started in June? Hopefully you've gone back and looked at molding and said, okay, if finishing has it, guess where it had to have come from? It had to have come from molding. Finishing has those units. Units transferred to finishing. That would have been what they started in June. So adding those two together has to be the number of units that we started during June. Okay? So we're going to take out our ending inventory. So we go back and look at the fact pattern, and our ending inventory was 2,000. So remember, that's going to end up being subtracted, because if it's in if it is in our ending inventory, it can't have been in process, or it's still in process. Get our pretty underline here. So that means the units that we would have had in ending inventory or in process would have been 57,000. Or 55,000, sorry. Misspoke. So that has to be the units that we would have transferred in. So now we need to take our beginning inventory out. Oops, go down one line, sorry. So our units in our beginning inventory, beginning work in process, were, if we go back to our pattern, we had 5,000 in beginning work in process. So that means we had 50,000 units started and completed in June. Okay. So now we need to figure out our equivalent units. So we're going to do the same process. Go ahead and split up direct materials and conversion. Use the same headings on the left. So we need to finish our beginning work in process. So, molding materials. Oh, and actually we have, if we go look back at the fact pattern, I forgot we have the molding materials. So it comes from part 2. So if you look, so we need to compute the equivalent units of direct materials and conversion for the finishing department in June. Direct materials include both those transferred in from the molding department and those added by the finishing department. So we're going to have some molding materials that still need to go in. So essentially we have 2 direct materials that are still being put into the process. And more direct materials. So we kind of have a 3-step process here. All right, so we need to finish our beginning work in process. So what in the world are we going to do for molding materials to finish our beginning work in process? So we have 5,000 units in our beginning work in process. However, those would have been started already. The molding materials have already been put in. So that's going to be 0. So now we can look at our direct materials needs. So 5,000 units. And if we go look at our fact pattern, inventories with respect to direct materials on June 1st in the finishing department are 20% complete with respect to direct materials. So if they're 20% complete, we have to finish them. That means we need 80%. With respect to conversion, they are 60% complete. So 5,000 units times 60%. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. They're 60% complete, so they require 40% to get them finished up. Sorry about that. Hope you're not terribly confused now. So that 5,000 units times the 40% to complete, because they're 60% complete already, is 2,000. So now we know started and completed during June. With respect to molding materials, remember we count all of those. So 50,000 across the board. Okay. So now we need to start our units in process. So our molding materials, so how many units do we use as our base? It has to be our units in ending inventory. So 2,000 units are there. They're 100% complete with respect to molding materials. So we count all of them. Now we go look at our June 30th completion. They are 75% complete with respect to direct materials. So that's the cost we've already put in. With respect to conversion, they are 90% complete. Okay, so now we have started our units in process for June. That's going to give us our equivalent units once we add everything up. 52,000 for molding materials, 55,000 for direct materials, and 53,800 for conversion. So now our cost per equivalent unit for molding materials. This one's easy. That's what got transferred in. Work in progress to us here, 1,560,000. Now we need to divide by our equivalent units. Make a nice line here. So our total costs divided by our equivalent units, $30 per equivalent unit for respect to molding materials. That should match what you transferred out, and it does. So we're in good shape. So direct materials. We have, go back to our fact pattern, $222,000 in direct materials costs. 55.5 equivalent units. Divide these suckers out. $4 a unit for direct materials. Now conversion. Back to our table. Conversion costs incurred in June in the finishing department, $430,400. We had 53,800 equivalent units. Divide them out. $8 per unit. So now, we've determined the cost per equivalent of input, cost per equivalent unit of input resource for the finishing department. So now we need a summary journal entry for the finishing department as well. So we're transferring from finishing department to finished goods. That's the last step in our process. So who's getting it? Finished goods inventory. That's who's getting it. How much are they getting? 2,310,000. How do we arrive at that? Finished goods inventory. We have 50 How many do we transfer in? I just forgot. Transfer to finishing. 55,000. Now, what were our total costs? Oops, forgot an equal sign. We right in it. So we're going to do it in one step and do it in our heads. We know how much molding materials were per unit. $30. Direct materials were 4. Conversion was 8. So we have a total of 30 plus 4 plus 8 is $42. Yeah. Okay. So that's our $2,310,000. So finished goods inventory, that's how much it gets. Now, where's it coming from? Us, finishing department. So we're taking it out of our work in process inventory. It's been transferred to finished goods. That is our summary journal entry. So now we want to know the last part, compute the cost assigned to ending inventory. So this is our ending work in process. So our molding materials, we're going to have 2,000 equivalent units in there. Let's do this. So our molding materials cost $30. Oops, sorry, I just realized I typed 40. $30. 60 grand there. $2,000 units, or 1,500 units, sorry. And direct materials right here at $4 each from here. And our conversion costs. And we had 1,800 equivalent units there at $8 piece. Pretty this up a little. So that has to be our ending inventory, ending work in process inventory value, cost assigned to it. 80,400. So that does it for problem 18.7b. So hopefully between 18.5 that's already posted in Canvas and this 18.7, which is a little more complicated than that one, you'll feel pretty confident in doing your homework and quiz for chapter 18. So I will see you guys next week, and if you have any issues, don't hesitate to email me. I can't promise that I will respond within 24 hours just because I don't know exactly what my schedule looks like, but I will respond to you as quickly as I possibly can. So, talk to you guys on Monday. Bye.